Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. And it is Food Allergy Awareness Week, if you didn't know. And I am so excited. It is Food Allergy Awareness Month, as well as this week is Food Allergy Awareness Week. So I am so excited to bring you 3 different conversations this week to really focus on food allergies. And my first guest is Christine Poole, that's beautiful lady sitting next to me. She's got 20 years of experience planning conferences for state, regional, and national associations. And she's got a keen eye for logistics and hospitality. But one thing that has changed in her planning is that she has been diagnosed, and it's been 23 years about, I think, if I do my math correctly, with a pine nut allergy. And so we're going to talk about how she, as a certified meeting professional, manages her food allergy on site for herself, but also in planning those events. So Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tracy. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you because we've talked about this for, quite a few years now, and some situations that you had. And I really want to start off with that. The first thing is that you have been 3 different times in planning events. You have been served pine nuts, even after you have disclosed your allergy to the chefs, to the catering managers, the event managers at the hotels. What can you talk about what happened in those situations?
Physically or
Yeah. Well, I guess physically, as well as, because one of them, you said the chef is like, well, I prepared this specifically for you, and you took a bite of it and noticed it was crunchy, and you found pine nuts in your meal, and the chef just told you that he had made it himself to make sure it was safe.
It was a really alarming and something that you don't expect, because when you prepare, for example, as meeting planners, when we do site visits, typically if you're working with your Convention and Visitors Bureau, they will have a form that asks questions of likes, dislikes, food allergies. And this Convention and Visitors Bureau did ask those questions. And so there was a feeling of safety. And so I went into this site visit. 2 of my clients were doctors, which is interesting that this happened. And the chef of this property, I look down, whenever I see green, it's either chimichurri or pesto. And I looked down, he saw that I was a little nervous, and he said, there's no pesto in your dish. And I said, okay. And I said, are you sure? Which I feel nervous saying that, because you don't want to question.
Yeah.
And he said, 100%. I made your dish myself, and I wanted to call the attention off of me. And so, I carried on the conversation with our group, and I bit into something. And as you said, Tracy, it was an immediate alarm. I took my fork, I went into the dish and saw that there were pine nuts at the bottom of the dish. So it was an immediate, 5-alarm fire going on with me. And from there, it was okay, this is not going to be good situation. I knew that it was not going to be a good situation. And I ended up going to the emergency room. Missed my last 2 site visits with my client. I felt embarrassed. I felt, how did this, I just couldn't understand how it had happened.
Well, I can't understand why it can happen. And the chef looked at you in the face and said, I made this myself. There are no pine nuts in it. He blatantly either didn't make it himself or he blatantly lied.
And that was, through the process of elimination, of going through everything. I don't know what the hotel did afterwards in the, finding out what had happened. I don't know if they said, I'm thinking this was a major hotel, one of the largest in the state of Florida, where I live. And there weren't any processes because it was the head chef. And so it became a question for me of what are your processes and how do you ensure, I worked in, I waited tables in college. I know that you have seat 59, that doesn't have tomatoes on their salad. And there are thorough processes that restaurants go through. It made me question, what are the processes that this hotel did not go through? And specifically for me, which was I thought, why in the world did they even have nuts of any kind, especially pine nuts?
Right. Well, and was it confirmed that the CVB had communicated it to the hotel?
Yes,
Yeah.
because they had also communicated to the hotel that I had my first site visit um,
Okay.
with, at the beginning of the day.
Right.
So, yes.
Yeah. Well, and I remember years ago, I did a site visit in Arizona, and the CVB had done the same thing, and they served my allergies to me. And chef is like, "Oh, we forgot," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" And I don't know what you and your clients chose to do, but my client chose not to do their meeting at that event, and that was like a $350,000 piece of business they lost because of that.
Exactly. And I was relieved to find out when the site selection committee did not choose that property.
Hmm.
And it was the way that the property handled everything, which was really distasteful, to be
Hmm.
honest, and not taking things seriously. That if this had been an attendee of our conference, all I could think was, how would the hotel handle it differently?
Right.
Which they probably would, which made me feel, as just a number.
Right.
So I didn't love the way that they handled things.
Right. So, okay, let take me back to the first time that you ever had an allergic because I said 23 years. So you got diagnosed in 2022, and because this was adult onset, right?
Yes. And so that's the thing that I tell a lot of people is that they don't understand and what I found out personally is that when a child has a peanut allergy, it is very severe and it's scary. It's a child, but as an adult, every exposure that I have is more serious and has been for me. So the first time I found out was probably in the late 90s, and it was at a social event. The process of elimination was difficult because um, unlike most people who have, when you have a tree nut allergy, it's every nut. Mine is just pine nuts, which is, how we figured that out. It was not easy, but we figured it out. But it was interesting in the professional experience. I was the meeting planner. I chose the menu, and I was at an event. It was one of the first events that I'd ever worked for the Florida Psychiatric Society, and it was in the fall, and everybody was in the sessions. I'm at the registration desk, and I started sniffling, and then I started sneezing. And the allergy was new to me. So I really didn't understand it and didn't understand symptoms. I thought it was fall. I must have shaken somebody's hand. I'm getting sick. But then it started the clearing my throat and sneezing more. And so I had to ask my CSM, can you check to see if there's pine nuts in this dish, which it was a pasta salad that I chose for the attendees. And the CSM came back with the chef. And this is when I found out something pretty mind blowing. It's mind blowing still to this day that the chef had let me know that when they cook large quantities of pasta, that hotels will use pesto to flavor the pasta. And to me, I'm thinking, wow, you should probably put that in your menu. You should
Right.
probably list that in a label. And I believe that hotels do, and they're doing a better job now because of people like you, Tracy, who are getting the word out there. But that was my own personal experience of, oh, I need to not select pasta salads from now on in my
Mhm.
menus, or maybe I need to ask, do you flavor your pasta with pesto? And is it a pine nut pesto, a traditional pesto?
That is a new question that I'm gonna ask. Start asking, when you're ordering your pesto or when you're ordering your pasta because you don't know. And I mean, and that's 2 allergens in just pesto. Because the dairy and the nuts. And
And
so I think
basil
that's
or
really
olive
important to.
oil?
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we have a fan on here. Stacy Hawthorne says she loves Christine and can't wait to hear more about this important issue. So, hi, hi, Stacy. Thanks for joining us.
Hi,
Um,
Stacy.
um, so, when that happened, what in your mind changed for you as a meeting professional? after, I mean, you had it for a couple of years, but, from the point you got diagnosed, did anything change in how you planned your meetings? And did that incident in 2020 or 2002 change the way you plan your menus?
It didn't, and it's taken time. And I'm embarrassed to admit that I need to do a better job. I was thinking about this, when thinking about the questions that we would talk about and the answers that I needed to give, is that I think that most people, when there's any type of, and Tracy, you taught me this, is that what I have is it's a handicap. It's a disability, and that we don't want to call attention to ourselves. It's even in
Mhm,
that moment when I found the pine nuts, when they started saying, "How are you? How are you? How are you feeling?" I wanted to call attention away from me and get back to the meeting, but I had
mhm,
clearly needed to have emergency treatment because my throat was closing up. But to answer your question, I feel that I am more diligent because I'm aware. I've met other people. One of my former board chairs also has not just allergies, but aversions to things. And so,
mhm,
where I think a lot of people, they discount these things, but even a lactose intolerance is something that is not fun to go through. And so learning from you how we label, how we work with our hotels to be better about letting attendees know what are the ingredients in the food, is, I feel, is so important. And so I feel that I am more cognizant to talk to the chef about preparations, about cross contamination and the
mhm,
potential for that. Where even if I'm attending a meeting, I I look at, if, for example, I help other meeting planners at their meetings, and I
mhm,
recognize when I'm on site, when I see hotels that are being cognizant of that, it makes me feel better and safer.
mhm,
Um, and people who don't have that don't understand, unless you've got a loved one that
mhm.
goes through this, you'll never know. But I
Right.
think I love to see the changes that hotels and restaurants are taking
Well, or even
and
somebody,
making.
that have yeah, and or even somebody at your event having an allergic reaction, right? Because clearly at your events, I mean, you've had, allergic reactions, and what is that situation? How is it handled? And it's also knowing, what is the hotel's response, or convention center, venue's response. I shouldn't even just throw it at that, but you know, does the EMT have epinephrine on site? What's the response time from the EMTs to get to the hotel if the venue doesn't have epinephrine on hand, right? And then what if it's a first time reaction that you don't even know that you're allergic, you know? So a variety
Those
of
are good
different things can
points.
play.
Yeah, when I think about what happened at this hotel, they didn't have epinephrine and they didn't have Benadryl. The convention and visitors rep had to go to the sundry store and buy Benadryl.
Mhm,
And I'm kind of mind blown right now thinking about it, because this, again, is one of the largest hotels in the state of Florida. And um, this shouldn't have happened. They should have had
right.
their EMT be prepared. Another thing I'd like to say, Tracy, is from this incident that happened, is for hotels to communicate to their staff of when
Mhm,
this happens, that they need to communicate to the rest of their team. Because I spent the day in the ER and then went to a sister property afterwards. What I found was that I had started having palpitations because my body was pumped full of epinephrine and then all kinds of other drugs. And so I started having palpitations and I became scared. I was a female business traveler by myself, without my family,
mhm.
a loved one, or anybody to care for me. And I called down to the operator and I said, I'm having chest palpitations. I spent the day at the ER. Is there somebody who can help me? And they seemed not to care, didn't
Wow.
know that was clear. And then they also said, oh, well, we can send security up. And I said, never mind. I was exhausted. I just wanted to go to bed. So I took a deep breath and prayed that I would wake up the next morning for my site visit with that hotel. So I probably, if I had the opportunity, I would communicate with hotels when they have this happen, to communicate to their team that you have somebody who had just spent the day in
Mhm,
the ER this may happen. What are your next steps? What are the contingency plans for something to happen? How do you care for this guest in the best manner to make them feel
Mm-hmm.
just, like a human being, not just somebody
Right.
that send them to the ER. So that's what I've thought of.
Well, and in my house, we watch 911 a lot, right? And Jennifer Love Hewitt is a 911 operator, and the calls that they get in, but in one way, somebody's going to, like you did, pick up the phone and call the hotel operator. But a lot of hotels don't have that person anymore, right? And depending on the level of the hotel. And so do we need to train them? And they should be trained in some sort of kind of first aid kind of response, or transfer you down to the loss prevention, safety and security office to be able to ask those questions, because you never know.
That's right. All I could think of is, so let's say that I passed away because I had a heart attack in the middle of the night. And, I didn't make it down to my site visit. What was the next step? Were they going to have anybody check on me? They had no clue of what had happened. And so even though I was not in the same property that the incident happened, this was a sister property. And so, okay, I'll give it to them, is that what didn't happen. I wasn't staying at the property that happened, but they should have communicated. And this to me indicated that they didn't understand the seriousness of it. The hotel that I stayed in let me know that they were aware of it, because they had a card when I got to my room that had, there was a card, a bottle of wine, a beautiful charcuterie, which, sat there because I just wanted to go to sleep. But the card said, next time. There was a reference to next time. And I thought, well, hopefully there's not a next time, because I'd like to live.
Right.
So, but just, interesting. And I think, I hate to say this, but it's morbid, but it's almost as if you're at a funeral. People don't know what to say in difficult situations. And so it's just show that you care by, asking questions of what can I do,
Right.
rather than saying something that just kind of is an insult to injury,
Right.
in a sense.
Yeah. All right. So I want to put up here, Stacy said you nailed it when you talked about, having the response to the epinephrine and to the Benadryl, at least, right, in the store. And I have actually had to go to a sundry shop in a convention center. Actually, I had to leave the convention center to go to the grocery store to get the Benadryl for somebody, because the sundry shop didn't have it. But Kathy's got a question on here. And Kathy, thank you for being here. Should planners include an EpiPen in their first aid kits to be able to promptly respond if an attendee has an allergic reaction like Christine's? If yes, how do we go about getting them? I'm going to say that I don't think we as planners can have them, but there are 36 states, and I will post the map of where those 36 states are, that allow places of public accommodation, i.e. convention centers, hotels, restaurants, to stock epinephrine without it being prescribed to me or Christine. So they can actually have it on property, just like a defibrillator. But they do need it. The states do require that a person has to be trained on how to administer it. So my first suggestion for you, Kathy, is to make sure that you're asking that of your properties when you're citing them, is like, who on staff, one, do you have epinephrine? And two, who is trained to administer it? The caveat on that is that epinephrine, where's my bag? Right now is about $300 a pen. There are a couple of other options that are out there now. Neffy, which is a nasal spray like the Narcan, and there's the Avicue.
Have you heard of Avicue? Yeah, Avicue. I really
yep.
like, because it gives instructions.
Yes,
it actually
does.
will talk to you.
I think. Hang on a minute. I'll be right back. Yeah, it looks, and it's a lot smaller. Here's the tester.
Yes.
So, and it does, like, you pull it out, or I think you pull it out, and it will.
This trainer contains is for training purposes
Yeah.
only.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
During an allergic
Yeah.
emergency.
And it tells you how to use
If
it.
you are ready to use Poole Red Safety Guard, place left end against.
not
Push
your
firmly
arm.
until you hear a click and 2, 1.
Oh.
Training complete.
So, and what the AvaQ does when
This
it,
trainer may be
the AvaQ does talk to you when you're administering it. But so I think the challenge is, not everybody is allowed to administer it on an EMT staff. So you need to make sure that there's people trained on it, but and who's going to respond. That's the biggest challenge, but I also think it's the cost associated with it as well. And I know one EMT I talked to, they do it in vials because the vial is less expensive than the EpiPen or some of these. So, Kathy, that's a good question. All right, here, actually, we have a question from Rama Pelzer. The pharma film is coming to market soon too, similar to Listerine strips.
Oh, that's
Which will
great.
be,
How easy.
yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think I will admit I've never used my EpiPen because
Mm.
I'm scared to use it. I mean, thinking of stabbing yourself in your leg with a
Right.
needle
Mhm.
is kind of scary, but that's why I preferred the AviQ if I could use
Mhm.
it. It's kind of like the prick when you get your
Right.
hemoglobin checked. The EpiPen is actually a little intimidating to pull out and think this big needle, but
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's things that we need to do. And I think that one that he just met, the pharma film, which I did see at the FACT food allergy conference last fall. They were talking about it, but also the Neffy, which just got FDA approval, I believe. Okay. So what systems in place do you have as a certified meeting professional? What systems do you have in place when you're planning your menus in talking to chefs about this?
Well,
Or
the
tiered
system is
planners
in
have in
place.
place.
Right. Yeah. I could be so much better. And I was thinking about this as I was looking through the questions is that I really need to prioritize this and not what I feel is that we as planners rely on our hotels. And it's taught me that unfortunately, we need to be so much more diligent to dig through to make sure that they are understanding how important this is. And I think
Mhm.
because of my own allergy, I'm a little bit more forceful in letting them know that this is just not something that I don't like.
Mhm.
They don't like me. I would love to love pine nuts because everybody says, "Oh, I love pesto," and I look at them and go, "Good for you." But the things I put in place is to have the conversation for sure
Mhm.
is to make
Right.
sure. And what I found is through the years is what is interesting is that they are taking things much more seriously, and for
Mhm.
me that makes me feel better.
Mhm.
Some of the things that I've seen you do is to have even more of a conversation of breaking it down.
Mhm.
That I would love to see hotels list all of the ingredients. Kind of going back to me selecting the menu, and yet there was
Mhm.
pesto in it, and I'm the one who picked it. Yet I think that I could be better at that, which I hope by people learning more is that they will understand how important this is. And,
Mhm.
when you had posted about the meeting planner dying at Disney Springs,
Mhm.
was it a planner?
No, she wasn't a planner. She was a doctor.
She was a
Yeah.
doctor, even worse, right? I mean,
Right.
not that
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
worse, but somebody where things can be um, prevented.
Mhm.
That's where I become very upset because I think about my own
Mhm.
happenings of I feel that they were neglectful and very casual about things. I think about those people. I think about their families. So
Mhm.
back to your question, the things that I have in place is communication, making sure in the BEOs that it's listed, trying to see if we can have things labeled. Could it be better? Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it could be a lot better, and it depends on what property you're at. It depends on what chef. I've had chefs tell me, I cook, I don't label, and then front of house. And I know I've repeated this multiple times. in multiple podcast episodes and when speaking, and a front of the house staff says, well, I don't cook, so how do I know what's in it? I'm like, y'all are a team. I'm like, you should not be battling against each other, right? In that conversation. And kind of going back, so there was the Disney Spring where the doctor died, and that she was actually at a restaurant. And the one thing that I saw online a couple weeks ago, and I need to go back and look at it to clarify, is that the restaurant was saying that her husband was asking for the recipe. The attorneys were asking for the recipe for the dish that she ate. And they said, no, that's proprietary information. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not proprietary information. We're not asking you for your recipe. We're asking you for the ingredients to know what was in it, and how that, those things can happen. And then there was the other young lady in December who passed away at an event, and she had shared that she had an allergy, and was fed her allergy. So, and then even Mike Tirico 2 weeks ago, right, at the Kentucky Derby, right? And he ate something while he was grazing before he went on air. But there's a lot of things that can just be done differently. And
yeah, I think what you were saying, the connection, that we're all connected. It's, I think about the process of when that happens of, okay, so you go to the registration desk and you let somebody know, or the banquet server, and they're just looking at you as if you're from Mars and not really caring. But I do think it comes from leadership for them to understand that you don't want somebody to die in your hotel. And so how do you prevent that? It is communication across all departments, and then contingency plan of what do you do in this situation? When we were at our conference in Seattle, we had a homeless person that had an incident happen in the bathroom right by our staff office. They handled that very well. And none of our attendees saw that. And, I'm thinking, okay, so is that the same way with your processes of somebody having an anaphylactic reaction at the hotel? And maybe they need to say, this isn't an embarrassment. This is taking care of somebody who's having something happen. Have some humanity in the way that you handle things. And they did. I will say this hotel handled it very professionally. It was behind the scenes, and we didn't have any of our attendees see it. But it makes me think about my own situation, that if I were not in the tasting kitchen at the hotel, which was with a small group of people, if this were in a general session, a luncheon, how would they handle it? And that's maybe something each hotel needs to think about and go through a scenario where they go through step by step of that process of, who the banquet staff, then they go to the banquet captain, then they go to the EMT, to loss prevention security. That's what this hotel called it, which I felt as if I was an item being stolen when they said, oh, loss prevention is contacting you. But yeah, I think that the hotels need to look at their processes and make sure that they've got these types of incidents included.
Right, exactly. And well, and even a venue that I was using last year, in the site visit, I was asking, he's like, oh yeah, we've all been trained on epinephrine and we have epinephrine on site. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And so at the pre-con meeting, which is like 2 months later, the head of security is like, what are you talking about? So I don't know who the person was that I was talking to that said that. I mean, he was on the security team, but where did he think that information, came from, that he was
hair on fire?
Exactly. And I'm like, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is fantastic that you have this. And then at the pre-con meeting, I'm told, oh no, we don't have that. So it's a lot of checks and balances and asking those processes, because what we see defibrillators, right? And this one, what is his name? Zach Marks in the UK has the kit. I don't know if you've seen it, the KITT.
No,
that he's
but you told me about it. Sounds amazing.
Installing in schools and businesses in the UK, and it's already saved people's lives, and it's amazing. So unfortunately it's not here in the States yet, but how do you, when you're doing your meals for other attendees and yourself, how do you prepare them? What is your method of communicating? Do you have personalized plates for them? Are you eliminating those allergens from the menus? What is your process for that?
Well, again, we could be better. And this, you teach me all the time. And then this most recent episode with myself made me think, okay, I need to be better. Um, but I think that the first thing that we do is in our registration, we do ask for attendees to list allergies or special needs. And then before I have to get my BEOs to the hotel, we look through the list and determine, if we need to prioritize certain things that we need to discuss with the hotel. And then, this is where I feel that we could be better, is then to have the conversation with the hotel. This is where we just finished our annual conference. There's record numbers, yay.
Yay.
But because I just had this happen the week after my annual conference, I had this last episode. It's making me feel that, okay, I need to be better because I don't want this to happen at our conference. And thank God we haven't had anybody that has let us know that there is an anaphylactic allergy. But I want to make sure that I'm listening to everybody that takes the time to list their allergies and take them seriously, whether it's, gluten-free, lactose, those types of things. So those are the steps that I take. I'm
Right.
willing and wanting to learn. And this is why, talking with you is important and learning. And so I want to know the things that I can do better for our group.
Yeah, no, I do this every day, right? And I'm looking at menus. I'm speaking next month at an event, I think it's next month, and they're having me go through the menus now and making sure that they're friendly, but we also have to have historical data, and we have to know what our attendees are, communicating. I actually have an event next month that somebody says they're allergic to chlorophyll. So I need to find out from them,
Wow.
what does that mean? Right. And what can I serve you? What can I not serve you? To get some more details. All right. We've got some comments here. Anne-Marie, go ahead.
No, I was going to say one of the things, though, that you said in preparing the meals is sometimes we've also had to, say, sorry, if you wouldn't mind, you may need to bring your own meal, because it's just sometimes we can't cater to an individual person, but we try our best to see what
Right.
we can do. And that's when I have the conversation with our convention services manager. But sometimes we do have to do that. It's just to say, you might, we are happy you're coming, but you may need to bring your own food. These are some stores that are nearby that can, you can get what you need very easily.
And so a question on that, are you giving money back to them from their registration for the cost of food?
We haven't, and they haven't asked, but we have not had that happen yet. So
Okay.
this was the particular instance that happened. That was actually one of our board chairs.
Okay. Yeah. And then my other question too is looking at that list, and that might be somebody that's got a long list, a variety of different things. And next week I'm interviewing Mia Silverman, who is allergic to 50 different foods, 50. And she's 20, she's about to graduate from college. So it'll be interesting to talk to her. But I also like looking at the list, flipping it. And I learned this from a chef, and he was elated by this. Tell me what you can eat, right? What do you like to eat? What can you eat? And then it helped that chef look at it from a positive outlook versus oh no, this is all banned. I mean, you have to pay attention to that. But I think it was Jeremy. He's like, I loved how I could go look at the can have list, and then that gave me my juices flowing and kind of in crystallizing some menu ideas. And
I love
and
that.
was
It's a great
8-course.
suggestion.
Yeah, so I really like that. Anne-Marie posted 2 different things on here. Here's the link to Kit Medical, which is Zach's company in the UK. And Anne-Marie, I would totally love to do that. And your link is way too long for the Marriott. She posted a story or a post from my friend Betsy Craig about Marriott has instituted a food allergy training program in their learning management systems. And they've been doing it for a bit, but now it's in their learning management system. So it's really cool. And then let's see, Kathy said, should we be including questions in hotel venue RFPs to ask how they would handle a guest with food allergic reaction? Wholeheartedly, yes, ma'am.
Love it.
What plan do they have in place? Who is responsible? How is the plan put into action? As planners, we shouldn't be providing medical care, but how reliable are the hotels venues in doing so? Really, really great question. And I think you need to put that in your RFP. And, Joan Eisenstadt, I learned this from her years ago too, is like, what is the emergency action plan across the board? Who do you have on site that can administer the defibrillator, administer epinephrine, do any kind of first aid? Or what's the response time from the EMTs to get here? And I think it's a really pertinent question these days when some fire departments, volunteer fire departments, staff is being cut from all of those things. So I think it's a really important question that we have in our RFPs across the board.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, okay. Thinking through, kind of what we've talked about already, what would you like to see? Are there anything, one or two things that you would like to see from our industry as a whole to help manage food allergies better?
Well, I think it's very interesting that the person pointed out that Marriott is giving some training to all their staff, and that's great. That I think that it takes one big dog to do something for the others to follow. And so it is, I think that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a moment, thinking about what I'd like to see. I'd like for them to continue what they're doing, which is to listen to what the consumers, what we place the business in their hotels, to what we're suggesting. Whenever I hear when you meet with hotels and restaurants and they are open to what you're suggesting, it is baby steps. I remember when I first spoke with you and you were telling me about some of the things that you had encountered. It is so nice to see that they are embracing that by doing these things, they're not just becoming better, but they're showing that hospitality really is hospitality, that it's caring for the people who are staying in their hotels, that it's not it shouldn't be looked at as an inconvenience. And that's the one thing that I got from you the first time that we spoke, that it almost was that they didn't want to take the time to do this because they've got too many things going on. Well, it's all good and fun until somebody gets hurt or dies. And so I would want the hotels to continue to be proactive about finding out about these allergies and the effects, and not taking for granted what I, heard this morning is that even if you have an EpiPen, you still have to go to the emergency room, and it's an inconvenience. And with my allergy, because every exposure to me is worse, it takes about 2 weeks for the drugs that I get pumped full of to get rid out of my system. And I am pretty much just kind of feeling horrible for 2 weeks after I have an exposure over something that could have been avoided in the first place. And so that for me was, we talked about this. You told me you didn't put it in my dish and then they were there, and it's happened a number of times. So I think it's just is being very diligent to have methods in place where you are double checking after each other, to be very clear, because when it happens, then it's not good. But if you avoid it in the first place, then, these things won't happen.
Right. Exactly. I mean, and there have been court cases and, around food allergies, none really that I know of. I mean, the two biggest ones I think right now are the ones that I mentioned earlier, the restaurant, because she had communicated her food allergies in advance. And same with the young lady, that Dominique Brown, who died at that event last year. But I think to call attention to it, and I don't think that it's, and I've said this, and I hate to say this, I'm like, does it take somebody dying at your event to you actually paying attention to it? Right. And yeah, and that's the wrong attitude, in my opinion.
And that's what makes me, frankly, angry, is because it's happened to me. And I'm thinking, why does this continue to happen? And it's not, and it seems an accident. But even when I said I have a pine nut allergy, then it has happened a number of
Mhm.
times where to me it seems as people say, oh, you know what, well, let's just give her a few. Like, let's see what
Right.
happens. And it's not a joke. And
No.
like you said, when you mentioned Mike Tirico, that was
Mhm.
on national TV, and how many people were
Mhm.
wondering what happened to him and why did he have to leave? And I'm sure he didn't want to announce to the world, oh, I have a nut allergy. But
Mhm.
maybe we need to not do as I do sometimes, where it's, I don't want to call attention to myself. Let's just get back to business.
Right. Yeah.
We do have to call attention, and there needs to be
Mhm.
awareness. And so I think that's the key
Right.
is spreading the word. Is the more people see this and they understand and they know what to do. I have friends when I go to events, if I'm blabbing, as everybody knows, I'm a chit chatty person. People will see green on their plates and they'll text me and they'll say, PCP, don't
Mhm.
eat that.
Mhm.
You don't want to eat this. And so I feel as if people know that
Right.
it is not a good thing. And it could be a scary thing if it happened to me.
Mhm.
So, I feel that every person that understands it spreads the word. It'll get better of the
Right.
awareness.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that you said that, it reminded me of a video that I saw yesterday on Instagram. And Red Sneakers for Oakley, which is an association and foundation association. Their child died of food allergies as well. But this woman, it's a point of view. You go to an Usher concert with a cherry allergy, and this is her telling him multiple times that no, I can't have that cherry that you're trying to feed me because I'm allergic.
Oh
And
my gosh.
like multiple times she had to say it, and then he finally goes, "Oh my gosh, she has a cherry allergy. Does anybody have an EpiPen?" I mean, so she's screaming it at him at a concert, but I mean,
I
even
have
that
not
kind of
seen that.
incident,
That's crazy.
isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but good for her
Just eat
for
it.
yeah,
Here, just
just
eat
like
it.
just eat it. And she's like, I'm allergic. So it it's not funny, unfortunately, right? But it is, and we don't want to call light to it, and
Then
it's
I do myself, I will reference just to add humor in, because that's what I do. I think when I'm uncomfortable is I will reference Will Smith from the movie
yes.
Hitch.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I take a picture, the screenshot of him looking into the camera at the pharmacy when he realizes what he looks like when he starts guzzling the Benadryl. And,
Mhm.
at the first, when he starts clearing his throat, he says, "Is it just me? Or is it itchy in here?"
Mhm.
So it's funny, but it's not. And especially
Right.
when it is
Mhm.
an anaphylactic
Mhm.
reaction.
Right.
So I felt, though, that that was a good way to introduce people to anaphylactic allergies, but then
Mhm.
they do need to understand that it's not, it shouldn't be taken lightly.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so Kathy piped in here again. Let's see. It says, as an industry, I'd love us to persuade culinary teams to stop offering menu items that include food allergens. If they don't cook with these items, guests won't experience a reaction. Kathy, that would be wholeheartedly, hands down, awesome. But unfortunately, I'm going to say the top 9 are eggs, milk, tree nuts, peanuts,
Nuts.
fish, shellfish, soy, sesame, and wheat. And for breakfast, I'm going to say eggs, milk, wheat, soy, sesame. Top 5 of those, of the 9, are probably, and peanuts and tree nuts. Tree nuts are probably in 6 of them are probably in our breakfast meals every single day. So I would love to avoid them. I have actually started to, when anybody has a nut allergy at any of the events that I'm planning and managing food and beverage, I'm eliminating nuts from the menu completely. And even if a hotel comes back and says, well, we're not a nut-free environment, I'm like, that's fine. And that's what I'm communicating to Christine. But our event space can be nut-free, right? And we can
Right.
make that space free, and we actually at SpinCon, like 7 years ago, I think it was, we had somebody allergic to apples. And we eliminated apples from the entire menu, and like she could not be in the room with an apple. And and we kind of made light of it, saying only Apple products are allowed in the space. But we were in a Great Wolf Lodge, there's going to be applesauce somewhere, right? But she felt safe in our space, right? And that's what we as planners, I think, can do with our hotel partners or any kind of venue catering partner.
Well, that's, one of the things I'd mentioned to you that was interesting is that when this last incident happened and the chef was literally in my room because I requested, I had a turkey wrap. It said it was going to have a garlic aioli. I opened it up because I was going to put mayonnaise on it. And I saw what looked very much like pesto and not a garlic aioli. They asked me about, do you have any allergies? I told them. And then I looked down and it was clearly pesto. The chef came to my room, which is, I laugh about it when I think about it now, but he said that they were a nut-free, they said he was a nut-free hotel. And in my room, there are the peanuts that are in the honor bar. And I'm thinking, well, that didn't make me feel safe because he just lied. So it is, make sure that you're not saying something or doing something that indicates otherwise. And it's easy to do that and not be as diligent is the word that I keep saying.
Right.
But, I feel that hotels are getting better. But my latest incident makes me wonder.
Right.
So,
okay. And it just begs me to question, we're a nut-free environment, but you have nuts on your pesto that you served on the sandwich. So that's not even counting the nuts that are in your sundry refrigerator.
Right. But see, that's the thing too, that it makes me think, because I become all of a sudden Nancy Drew, to sit there and go through the steps of, well, wait a minute, you said this. When I asked both the chef and I think his sous chef, it was the craziest thing that I've had the head chef of the hotel in my sleeping room. But I had the wrap sitting there and I said, this doesn't look like a garlic aioli. And I was expecting them to say, you're right. But they said, actually, what was it? They didn't answer the question the right way. They didn't say that it's not a garlic aioli. And then it made me think, oh, wait a minute. You were supposed to say, no, actually, that is a garlic aioli. But then I thought, well, so then it's a pesto. So then they should have said, we make our pesto without nuts. Because that's the thing that I've learned in my process, is that a pesto can be without nuts. It's
right.
Olive oil and basil. The traditional pesto is with pine nuts, but you can have walnut pesto, pistachio pesto, sunflower pesto. So, but he didn't go into that. And then, so that's where it became a little crazy to me when I get a call 2 days later from loss prevention of the flag of this hotel, which I will not name. But it made me think, oh, they did give me pesto. So that's where I start thinking, there needs to be a process of, okay, meal is made, check to make sure everything is in place before it's delivered, check it again. Before it leaves the door of the kitchen, check it again. So there are all these things that make me wonder about what the hotels are doing. And I would love to see the Marriott. I'm not sure, Tracy, you'll probably take a look at it for all of us and make sure that they're covering the right bases. But they should include you on these types of things, or somebody like you, because it's clear that sometimes these things are not as thorough as they need to be.
Right. Yeah. And you are probably training a wide variety of people. Some are in the kitchen, some are not in the kitchen, but it's that conversation. And I actually just went through my food handler certification, manager certification again last week, got a 93. Yay. And I was actually impressed that we talked about allergens a little bit longer than we did when I first took it. So I was happy about that. But it is a conversation that still needs to be had. And we're feeding millions of people every single day. And, and actually there's a bill in California, and I talked to Addie and Robin Lau 2 weeks ago about this bill. It's called the Addy bill, and it's actually asking hotel or restaurants to require food labeling, allergen labeling on their menus. And there's been some pushback on it, but also like any food service I'm like, make sure this also includes hotels and convention centers, not just restaurants, because we need to
Definitely.
make sure that across the board, that if it's a law for one food service kind of company, it should be a law for everybody. So, okay.
Absolutely.
All right. I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you. You ready?
As ready as I'm ever going to be.
Okay. What is your most memorable meal at an event, good or bad?
Well, bad would be the one that started everything off because now I've become paranoid. But good, I would say, is that I had a wonderful chef who was at, I will say, the Naples Grand, and Chef
Mhm.
Jeff was so eager to please my group. This was with the Florida Sheriff's Association, and he put in what was it? A Delmonico round of beef that was the most delicious thing. And when I go to a steak restaurant, wow, a Delmonico, that sounds so fancy. He
Uh-huh.
did that, but not only did he do that, but he made sure to walk around to talk to our guests. And I had never had that happen before. And he was definitely somebody who had a see it, own it attitude.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of chefs, I think it's changing, but they had the prima donna type
Mhm.
of reputation. This chef was an everyday chef. He, in the site visit, stopped me talking and said, "Excuse me for a moment," went and picked up a piece of trash from underneath the credenza. And I thought, who is this guy? But so from then on, everything he prepared seemed to be made with love. And so I always, it sticks in my head because it wasn't just a meal that I ate, but it was a meal that everybody else ate too.
That's awesome. I can say that about my chef at the JW Austin 2 weeks last month. Last month, yeah. Koa fam. He was fantastic. Same thing. He's like, I am here to make sure that you eat well, and was down on the floor a lot. So I would really appreciate that.
Love it.
Okay, yeah. All right. What is your go-to planner tool that you cannot live without?
My staff. I had to
Your
think
staff?
about that. Yeah, my team.
Mhm.
I could say my function sheet because it's the Bible, which we all use as our little cheat, and it's gone from big books to stapled paper to, now is in the Microsoft Surface
Mhm.
Surface Pro. That my team, I think that I am not great if I don't have them, and they make me who I am because they're an extension of me. And so I feel that that is my best tool and weapon.
Awesome. I love that. Buffet or plated meal, which is safer in your opinion?
Um, I don't know if I know the answer to that question, Tracy. You probably know, but I feel that in a plated, it's
Mhm.
much more easy to manage for specific needs for individuals.
Mhm.
Um, but however, if we are going to hotels being more educated and prepared and understanding what they need to do for buffets, if we are able to provide the information that they need with our attendees' dietary restrictions and needs and to do the labeling, I feel that a buffet can be safe, but easier, mm,
Yeah.
subjective, you know?
Yeah. And it's having good protocols in place to make sure of that, and also talking to that guest to see how comfortable they are, even if it is labeled, right? I think it
For
comes down to
sure.
that too. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
What is one thing you always pack in your event bag?
Well, an EpiPen. Yeah, now I used to not, but I need to be better about, being a female. We switch out purses for
Mm,
accessories. I need to make sure that I take the EpiPen out
mhm,
because what I find is, trend restaurants are trendy. And I remember I was in Vancouver. This was after my annual conference was in Seattle at the beginning of April. And I went to a Japanese restaurant and I just jokingly said, she asked about allergies. And I said, "Oh, pine nuts, but you're not going to have these here." And she said to me, "Well, we do use some pine nuts in some things," and that blew my mind because of the fusion trendiness of, of combining things, but that was a little scary to me. But I would say the EpiPen, and all truth and jest. But
Right. Yeah.
EpiPen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then one last question. If you could describe your food allergy in one word.
Inconvenient.
Yep. Okay.
It slows me down.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can't just go eat whatever you want, and you have to ask lots of questions. Yeah.
And when it happens, it takes me out. So I am not going to be available once I have an interaction. It used to be that I could pop a couple of Benadryl, but since I have worse interactions with each exposure, it's not fun, and it is an inconvenience, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, for sure. And I know there are conversations about Benadryl, whether we should take it or we should not take it. I know it's been a long-term, choice of medicine. So that's a whole nother conversation that we can go into at another time. But it is, something that we need to be concerned about. So I thank you so much for being on here and spending time with me, Christine.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate the ability to share, and I hope that people understand and spread the word and become more aware about these things.
Me too. And if you want to connect with Christine on LinkedIn, there is her LinkedIn profile. It's P-Christine Poole. And not dot, but yes. So this week is Food Allergy Awareness Week. I have Christine today. Tomorrow I have two other meeting planners, Colleen and Jessica, who are going to talk about how they are moms of kids with food allergies and how they use their mom tools to plan meetings and events. And then on Thursday, we're talking about the psychological impacts of this. So of having a food allergy and what that means. And Kathy just came in and said, great conversation. Thank you, Tracy and Christine. Thank you for being here, Kathy. We really appreciate it. And share this video out. It will live on LinkedIn, but please share it out to other people so we can make more people aware. And Christine, hang on with me for a second. Everybody, tomorrow at 12 o'clock and Thursday at 11. Join me then. All right. Thanks. Bye.